Stephen, lots to talk about. Before we really get into things, I wanted to know why you've decided that now is the time to sit down and speak to us.
So we always wanted to do an interview post the transfer window, but I think obviously with the head coach change in the last week or so, it's delayed it slightly. But I think it's important to give a message, a direct message, to the supporters, especially when things aren't going as well as we wanted. And we have to face that and front it up, and it'd be good to chat to you about it all today.
Let's start with matters on the field. You appointed a new head coach last week. Why is John Eustace the man for the job?
Well, I think first of all his track record speaks for itself with what he's achieved most recently at Blackburn. The first season there, similar time to this in the February, then avoiding or being involved in a relegation battle and surviving, and then what he's built and achieved in that sort of second season, if you like, with them to get them into top six. But also, previously at Birmingham and in that short spell at QPR, he clearly has the credentials for building what we're talking about in this football club for that medium to longer term, as well as dealing with the difficulties that lie in front of us in that short term. As a person, I think we all know him at the football club, and I think he knows the football club as well. So a lot of the staff are still here from when he was here last time, and I'm sure it's very easy for him to settle back in, a bit like a family here at the football club for him, and hit the ground running.
It appeared to take a little bit of time to get to him. Take us through the process for identifying and for recruiting a new manager.
So, as with anything, players or backroom staff, you always have to have a plan and succession planning. So it's something you have to look at with our sports intelligence department as well in the background. So for us, it's something that we were always thinking about. You've got to, whether the circumstances that we found ourselves in or when you find yourselves in other circumstances where managers leave for other reasons. But I think for us, we have that succession plan and that shortlist. John was always our number one target within that. And it's something that we knew we wanted to do once the decision was made.
So what role do you play in identifying, recruiting the new head coach manager?
So ultimately, it's once the decision's made, that's obviously David's decision. As I mentioned in your question previously, we have to have been prepared beforehand in terms of that succession planning. I said John was always our number one target. So once that decision's made, it's down to me to then take that hands-on role to approach the club, to see about getting permission to speak to the new head coach, to do personal terms, and also to make sure that vision and the plan that we've got in place for this football club and what we're trying to achieve and build here has come across loud and clear in terms of what we want to do. And I think with John, him knowing the club already was helpful, but I think as well being able to give him that comfort of what he's coming into here, how we want to back him, how we want to build this football club, how we do things in the right way as well, and then ultimately, once he's got to that decision where he wants to have that conversation directly with David, David managed to sell that to him as well and show what real intentions we've got here and what a great football club we are.
It's been an eventful couple of weeks. Let's just clear up a couple of things. Why did you decide to sack Paul Warne, and why did you decide to do it just 24 hours before what was an important game at Norwich?
So I get the timing of this was not ideal. I think results speak for themselves, but I think, again, once the decision was made on that Friday morning, rightly or wrongly, David and I always have this viewpoint that we say to people, any incoming person into the football club, that we want to make sure that we treat people just as well on the way out as we do on the way in. We've always been honest about that. And I think for us, take it on the chin, timing was not ideal. But for us, the human side of it, once we made that decision, we felt that Norwich away, given Paul's affinity with Norwich as his home club, his hometown, his family were due to be there at the game. We wanted to make sure that we did things the right way, and we thought that was correct. So accept the timing was not ideal. But again, there are risks in terms of where you go. At that point, you can't make a move to look for a new manager when you've still got a manager in place. So there are risks and the rewards with that. And I think, therefore, once we've made that decision and decided that we wanted to make a move for John, we went all out with that, and it came off.
I know there was some speculation about the manner in which Paul Warne was sacked. Do you want to clear up about exactly how the news was delivered to him?
Yes, so I think, again, as you said, there are always speculation, which isn't necessarily true. So we'd obviously made the decision, and the decision that we wanted to do it before they travelled to the game for Norwich. So David and I asked Paul and Richie to come and meet us at David's house to have a chat and obviously deliver the news, which we did. I think we were conscious of timings, but again, it wasn't as close to the players travelling as people maybe made out. What I wanted to do as well is make sure that I delivered the news face-to-face back at the training ground to the players and to the staff. We did say to Paul if he wanted to go back to speak to people he could do, but understandably he said from his side that he didn't want to do that, and we will respect that. So I went back and addressed the players and the staff with where we were. Firstly, I spoke to Matt Hamshaw and Andy Warrington when I got back, and said to them, look, would they be happy to remain on and take charge of the games and see where we went from there? And they immediately said they would, which I think says a lot. Because I think people have talked about, potential or accused of chaos in the background. It certainly isn't, certainly wasn't. And I think the fact that the relationships that we had and we have with all the staff, for those guys to agree to do that without hesitation, says a lot, really. You
said you broke the news to the players and the staff yourself. What was their reaction to the decision?
So they're clearly disappointed in terms of everybody's. Everybody loves Paul, everybody loves the coaching staff. They were big characters. Got to remember that Paul and his coaching staff delivered some of the best memories ever and got us out of some of the darkest times that we've had in recent history, and turned this club around with what they achieved last season in League One, and we'll forever be grateful for them. So clearly people were disappointed in terms of that. The timing of it, again, as I accept, and we'll take that on the chin, and some of the players had some things to say around that timing, but again, I just explained, like I've just done to you, the timing of it and the human nature reasons to it is why we wanted to do it that way and why we felt we needed to. But they were ultimate professionals, and then you saw what they did at Norwich the next day, and they were truly professional with it.
You mentioned the timing. Why did you give Paul Warne the transfer window and not make the call early? Because results had been going in the wrong direction for a little while.
Yeah. So a transfer window is not all about head coach. So in terms of the transfer window, it's not a head coach's transfer window. I still stand by it's a club's transfer window. It really is. So we had our plan going into the window originally, and I think Paul and us as a club have talked about the business that we wanted to do in that transfer window. So it was always about getting a striker in, another midfielder, and obviously then we had the injury to Ryan Nyambe, so we were originally looking at a right back as well. So the transfer window was a club's transfer window. Obviously we'll never bring players in that a head coach doesn't have the ultimate sign-off and approval, but we've never been in that position, I don't believe. So with the transfer window, we had to be agile with that as well. With around turn of events, we didn't necessarily expect for Brighton to come back in for cash-in, but we had to deal with that. And I think as well, the fact that we had those other succession plans in regards to the playing side of things, we always have that in place, and we were able to be reactive and agile. And I think in terms of what we did around Sondra Langas, and with the injury to Curtis Nelson, which again was nothing that could be predicted, and getting Matt Clark back at the football club, I think was some decent business.
We'll return to the transfer window in a moment, but I just want to draw a line under the sort of head coach issue. What is the process for reviewing the team's position, the team's performance, and how you decide when to make a change or not make a change?
I think we've just got to be brutally honest with ourselves, and I think we've got to look at that, we've got to reflect, and the results spoke for themselves, and I think it was clear that the players needed a fresh voice, and it was a decision that we thought we had to make, and we wanted to make it quickly to give us that best chance of bouncing back and building for the short term as well as that medium and long term.
I think there is an update on the coaching staff going forward as well.
Yes, so Matt Hamshaw and Andy Warrington have made the decision over the weekend that they wanted to leave. That is a personal decision for them. I think they accepted as well and said, look, the players do just need that fresh voice, a completely clean break. But I think, as I said earlier on, the relationship that we've still got with those guys is, from a personal perspective and as individuals for everything they've achieved at this football club, they'll be part of the Derby County family forever for what they've achieved.
Let's return to the topic of the transfer window. You mentioned a couple of the deals already, but to recap, Erin Cashin sold to Brighton, James Collins to Lincoln, Sonny Bradley to Wickham, Tuanda Chilewa went back to Wolves following his loan. You brought in Lars-Jørgen Salverson, Matt Clark, Sondre Langas on permanent deals, plus Harrison Armstrong on loan from Everton. Are you happy with the work that you did in the window?
You're never happy with the work that you've done in a window, especially a January window or a January window like this one. I'm sure most clubs will say that this January in particular has been a very, very tough one for many, many football clubs. It is the worst time to try and do business, and you try and do as least as possible within that. In terms of what we brought in, I think we as I said earlier on, we were agile. The planning paid off. We're still only in the very first season around what we're trying to do on the sports intelligence side, but I think you can see that with the quality we brought in, it's starting to pay off. But I think, are we ever happy? No. Could we have done more? Absolutely. And I think some of the deals that we lost on the last day of the transfer window, I'll be completely honest, we were disappointed about, but was out of our hands, some of it. In the January window, you can have things lined up, you can have deals agreed with clubs, with players, with their representatives, all ready to go, and it's like a domino effect. It genuinely is. So some of the ones that we lost out on, they just haven't come out from the parent clubs. And that could be target number 1, target number 2, and target number 3. So it's very, very difficult, and those decisions are out of our hands.
On that, Paul Warne talked prior to the deadline that he wanted another wide player, another striker. He also talked about deals essentially being agreed and then not happening. I appreciate it's delicate because you're talking about players at other clubs, but can you give us some details as to why those deals fell apart, if that's the right way to phrase it? Yeah,
so I think, as I just said, some of the deals were essentially at the final hour, the parent clubs of those ones, which some of them were permanents and some were loans, decided that those players were going to stay in. Again, some due to injuries that they sustained within their squads that meant things changed. Other deals, it was essentially people decided to go to other football clubs. David has always talked about, and I've always mentioned as well, even though we do believe we've got that competitive budget, some of the deals we won't do something if it doesn't make financial sense. And I think one of the deals that we had lined up, which we've been looking at since probably the start of December, and having those conversations, another football club were willing to pay for a player that's not actually featured in the Championship yet, £1.5 million for them to sign for 3 months to the end of the season. And for us, when we talk about that risk versus reward, even though we could have afforded it, we weren't willing to necessarily take that risk and that financial risk for someone that hadn't yet played in the Championship. And so you can lose deals based on us making our own decisions internally, but you can also lose deals out for things that are out of your hands.
You used the term competitive budget. It is the phrase that David Clowes used in the off-season. Do you stand by that statement, or have you been surprised at the levels of spending in the Championship?
So you'll always be surprised by certain clubs spending in the Championship. So those clubs are parachute clubs at the very top end of the Championship. I do believe that we have put together a competitive budget, and from now speaking to even just John in the last few days, we know that we have got a competitive budget. I think coming up from League One and probably the expectations of where people saw and thought of us, I think that has been a competitive budget. What has probably not helped are the injuries. But again, as I mentioned to you earlier on, you know, how we've been reactive and agile in that January window, either through injuries or through, you know, losing cash in to Brighton. What we've managed to do in terms of the quality of the people we've brought in as replacements has not been through a lack of budget or investment.
Obviously, planning starts for every window quite a long way in advance. I'm sure you're already thinking about the summer. Presumably, when you started planning for January, the team was in a much better position in the table. Do you think the club were complacent at all about how much work needed to be done for the squad?
No, definitely not. You know, I would never say that we were complacent in that regard. The amount of work that goes in the background in terms of looking at target succession planning, you know, how we had to be in January, not to keep going on about it, but you know, we went into the January window looking for a midfielder, a striker, possibly a right back, and maybe one other attacking option at the start of the window. When we came out, you know, Ryan Nyambe had progressed so well, we weren't necessarily looking for a right back, but then you get an injury to Kane Wilson, and you have to think again. In terms of at centre halves with Curtis Nelson getting his injury, which nobody could have predicted. We didn't expect Brighton to come back in for cash-in, so we'd always planned for that. Asondra Langas was not somebody that had just come on the radar a couple of days before. It's one that we'd been looking at and monitoring for a while. And the same with Lars-Jørgen Salvesen. He'd been on the radar since the summer. So there's been a lot of planning and work in place. But as I said before, you know, with what we did in the window, we were happy with the quality. But in terms of the numbers, we'd have liked to have done more.
I know recruitment is very much a team effort. Yourself, the head coach and his staff, the recruitment team led by Mark Thomas, and now the sporting intelligence department as well. Mo Bobat and Ed Smith, can you explain what input they have in particular?
Yeah, and again, I've seen speculation in terms of this and people debating around what we're trying to build. The sporting intelligence side for us is really important moving forwards, and I think the important point on that is we restructured in the summer. So we brought a new head of sports science and medicine in, obviously Ed and Mo heading up sports intelligence. We've got Mark Thomas, as you mentioned, in terms of the recruitment side. We've brought in a head of data and analytics. And now what we've done is we've done that whole second part of the restructure, and we're just going out at the moment for the role of head of talent acquisition. And I'm sure you're going to come on at some point and ask me around the question and speculation that people mentioned around a director of football or technical director. But I think for us, what we're putting in the structure at the moment really works and fits. The important point to note around Ed and Mo is they're not necessarily in and around that, what I call the footballing decisions. So they're not there in terms of questioning the performances on the pitch or anything like that, or the types of recruitment. What they're about is that high performance, elite sport environment and the processes in the background. So the sport and intelligence area is around how do we make sure that all of these people that we've got in these positions that are experts in their field, whether it be sports science and medicine, whether it be in the data side, whether it be recruitment, whether it be in analytics, whether it be the coaching side of things, how do we pull all that together in the background and make sure that is there? They're almost like a service department to make sure that people are getting the best information, the best processes, so we can make the right decisions. And then for us, it's when we look back, we're not going to get all the decisions right, but when we look back at those decisions, if we can say we'd make that same decision again, and we justified it, for us internally, that's how we want to work. And I think what they're bringing to that, you've seen so far in the summer transfer window and what we've managed to do with the quality in January. And as I say, early stages, it's the first season. We've still got one more role to fill within that department, but then that has been part of that draw for John to come to us as well as part of that head coach, because you know, for him, we want to make sure that he's got all the tools to be successful in that medium to longer term as well.
Where do Palantir fit into all this?
So again, Palantir are in the background in terms of that side of things. So we're not trying to do a money ball. We're not trying to do, people talk about, you know, the amazing things that have been done at Brighton and Brentford in terms of that sports betting data. That's not what we're about. We're trying to make sure that we're looking at the data side in conjunction with the expertise of people within there, and Palantir are effectively a large data and AI company that can help us in the background to process, manipulate and assimilate all the data and all of the information. So we don't necessarily have access to any different data that other football clubs have, but moving forwards what we will have the ability to do is analyse that data to help back up decisions and make more informed decisions, rather than having departments of tens and tens of people manually doing processing data or looking at information. So for us it's a long-term project with those guys that we're in the early stages of.
On the topic of off-field club structure, and you mentioned it, one criticism is that there is not enough football expertise at board level, and you don't have a director of football, for instance. How do you respond to that?
So I think for us, and again this is conscious, I'll be really open about it, that role of that director of football has got that stereotype of being somebody that has that overall power and autonomy over the head coach, the football and the direction of where we're trying to go with that. That's not something we believe in. However, the main core roles of that director of football, I think, are built into what we're looking to bring in with the new head of talent acquisition. So the recruitment department now, rather than it just being recruitment, we've split that off into talent identification, which is effectively scouting, of which Mark is that head of talent identification. We've got the head of data and analytics, which focuses on the data side and will work with everything with Palantir. And we've got the head of sports science and medicine. This role now, in terms of head of talent acquisition, that is that person that is the real football guy. They're going to be that person that has got that gravitas, that is respected within the industry, that can have those conversations and the football conversations with the coaching staff. Because let's face it, the head coach, whether it's you're flying high at the top of the table or you're in a relegation battle, you're focused on what you need and what you want to do on that pitch of a Tuesday or a Saturday, wherever the games are. We don't want to be dragging that head coach away to be taking their time to focus on this longer term planning. So we want somebody that can talk that language, can translate and get what the football side of the business are looking for, and then translate that across into, from a data perspective, in terms of that opposition analysis and making sure that department is running well and servicing John and the coaching staff, whether the data of identifying players through data, whether the scouting departments with the eyes on the players, how we actually do all of that side of things and translating it on, bringing it together, the player profiling, the due diligence, the contacts within the industry at other football clubs or with agents. That is that football person. So a lot of those roles, that is what a director of football will do. But for us, we don't just want that one sole role that we think is responsible for everything, because this is a collective. And as I've said so many times, I cannot be an expert in everything, but it's my job to make sure that we've got experts around the business, whether it be commercial, whether it be in the engineering side, whether it be the football, the medical, the academy, those experts, and it's up to me to then bring those people together for them to help drive this vision forwards.
I'm interested in the dynamic of that, and I appreciate you'll be adding another voice to it. You've talked before about there being alignment within the board. How do you make sure that there isn't too much alignment? How do you make sure that people feel as though they can give their opinion, there can be disagreement when you make decisions?
Yeah. So what I'd say is there is alignment, but there's alignment to the vision and where we want to go. Because this is about the football club. It's not about one individual anywhere within the football club. However, I can assure you that with this, people don't always agree. There is that check and challenge. But essentially, we make sure that when we've talked about a football executive. So when the football executives sit down, that is the coaches putting their opinions across. It's medical, it's the data, it's the recruitment, all of that side of things, and they have to go into the mix. Not everybody agrees, and there is that check and challenge, and it's the same at board level. But essentially, there has to be that healthy debate. But ultimately, once we get to that decision, to the outside world, people will never know whether people all fully agree. but we are all agreed and will stand shoulder to shoulder with those decisions to move forwards.
Something that was promised perhaps as far back as when Clowes Developments purchased the club was the appointment of a new chairman. Yeah. David Clowes talked in the summer about there being candidates with football experience that were in the running. Yeah. Why has there not yet been an appointment made?
So there's still ongoing investment conversations. David has been clear since day one. He was looking for investment into the football club. And I think the challenge with appointing a chairman that is always an appointment that needs to be done in conjunction with your investors, your co-investors in that regard. So I think for us, that has been put on, I wouldn't say the back burner, that's probably the wrong terminology, but that is part of the ongoing investment discussions that David is having at the moment.
Is there any significant update on that front? Because it is something investment ownership that has been talked about for a while.
And as I said, David has been looking for that. We've been having conversations for quite a while now. But what David is very, very clear on is his love for this football club. You know, he will not have investors that come in that don't share his vision, don't share where we want to go with this football club. And by that, he's talked about his stability, integrity, progress. And he will not want anything to happen to this football club like that he's seen throughout his lifetime and supporting this football club. He won't want to happen again. And he wants to make sure that any investors coming on board are aligned with this vision in terms of looking after the football club and it being remaining this main pillar in the community and the family that's been built both with the supporters and the staff internally.
So there's no timeline in terms of when there might be an announcement. It is very much a fluid situation.
It's a fluid situation. There are investment conversations ongoing, and there have been for a while. But from David's perspective, you know, when there's updates to share, he will absolutely do that. And again, we will share those when things are updated.
Finally, Stephen, your message to the supporters as we go into the final few months of the campaign.
So I think now we've got the new head coach in place with John Eustace. I think for us, the supporters and the way that they've been with this football club, that never say die attitude, that fighting attitude. I think John has talked about the fact that we are fighters, not victims, and he said that already. And I think the support that we've seen from the fan base, from the supporter base, through all of those dark times of administration, I think if they continue with that, get behind the team, we all know that the players are giving it 100%. John loves his football club. He's bought into what we're trying to do. I think it's a real coup that we've managed to attract John to the football club. And, you know, I think that says a lot in terms of what we're trying to build here. And I think if people can continue to get behind him, because as we saw at Norwich, as we've seen at all the home games, you know, it has a huge difference, and I think everybody's been fantastic for them to continue to do that. You know, as they always say, we fight till the end, and I know everybody will.